This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors: the Trial Lawyers Association of BC, the Vancouver Courier newspaper, KCM Wealth Management, Continuing in our election series for the May 14th provincial election, we're happy to welcome to our studios Nathaniel Lim from the BC Conservative Party, a first-time candidate, as many of the Conservative candidates are. We'll get into that. And Mr. Lim has actually, what an interesting career, began in aircraft electronics and then made a gigantic shift to the people business, and now he's a family and youth counselor in his neighborhood, and he does a lot of volunteer work, Big Brothers, Richmond Lions, Manor Senior Home, Family and Youth Court Advisory Services, and so on. And so we're delighted to have him here. Hi, Nathaniel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Best of luck in the election. Now, what mad thing seized your crazy head to go and do this? Why would you do such a thing?
Well, I've always been interested in politics and how our society is run. But for me, working with families and children, I see a lot of the difficulties people face. And I find that families that I work with, the ones that are more resilient, that can do more things, are the ones that have more resources. Okay? And I see a lot of them struggling. I think I wanted to get involved because I see all the financial troubles that they're having. There's difficulties finding jobs, difficulties paying the bills and all those things. And I thought some stuff had to change.
And you work in the Richmond area?
I work in Vancouver and in Richmond.
Oh, but you're running in Richmond East.
I'm running in Richmond East, yeah.
This is an odd question, but it just occurs to me. Is there a kind of cultural mindset of denial in Richmond? Is there a cultural mindset that says we don't really have these problems?
There is, because when you drive around Richmond, you see a lot of people that are quite affluent.
Absolutely.
You see six-figure cars, cars all over the place, driven by young men and women.
$500 for 4 or 5 people at the Shanghai River restaurant.
That's a good restaurant, by the way.
It is, but it's expensive.
It's expensive. Yeah. But then again, when I go to work every day, I walk by the food bank and you see the lineups are long. It gets longer every week. And there's lots of pockets within Richmond. A lot of people are struggling.
And in those lineups in Richmond, do we see many different faces?
Yes.
Do we see all ethnicities?
Yes, we see all ethnicities.
Wow.
Yeah.
I confess ignorance on that note.
Yeah.
I didn't
and
know
you know, it's not even just people in extreme poverty or people that need to go to food banks.
Yes.
I've been going door knocking a lot, and a lot of people are just regular middle class people that are struggling, having a hard time keeping up with bills.
So seeing these kinds of things and being involved with these people's struggles on a daily basis, you're thinking, if only I could be in office and do something, what would you do? What? I mean, you're not going to be premier tomorrow, but what if you were premier? What if Mr. Cummins is elected the leader, and he gives you a cabinet post? What would you do to alleviate some of that struggle?
No, one thing that drew me to the Conservative Party is like I grew up learning that you shouldn't spend what you don't have. Yeah. One of the things that drew me to the Conservative Party is that stance that they've taken. We have the budget fiscal framework that we came out. I think that's a great start to.
You got a 5-year plan.
Yeah, we got a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
So it's great. I think that comes out. There's lots of money to be saved, and I think there's lots of things that can be done with that.
Let's talk about. Let's make sure that everybody understands the difference between BC Conservatives and the federal Conservatives.
Yep.
Is there an alignment?
No, there isn't. They're completely two separate organizations.
And how do you draw that distinction if someone in a cafe stops you and asks you?
Well, the BC Conservative Party, we have a lot of people members that are part of the Federal Conservative Party, but our leadership's different, our board's different, and our mandate's different. There's some similarities because we're all conservatives.
One of the questions that the press are asking these days is if Mr. Dix or Madam Clark, and we should throw in Mr. Cummins and whoever else may be running a party these days, if one of these people is in charge, what's their relationship with Stephen Harper? And of course, the popular press will say that Christy Clark gets along reasonably well with Mr. Harper. They're somewhat of the same cloth, but Mr. Dix, not so much. Now, Mr. Cummins has an interesting history.
Yes, he does.
If memory serves, he stepped away from the
Conservative Party.
What did he do? He sat as an independent?
He was an MP with the Conservative Party, actually in the riding that I'm, the area that I'm running for. And he decided to step down and run for the BC Conservative, lead the BC Conservative Party.
But didn't he stay for a while as an independent?
I don't believe so, actually.
Oh, okay.
What I do know, though, is that part of the reason I'm following Mr. Cummins is because of his stance towards what he did when he was in federal politics.
Which is?
Which is he stood for his constituents.
Yes.
And he stood up to Mr. Harper on different issues that he wanted to represent his constituents first and not just follow the party line.
The file that he became, for which he became most famous, and for which he was, I think, most publicly vocal, was fisheries.
Yes.
And he really made a big noise about his sense that Aboriginals had been given too much and that they were taking too large an advantage and disadvantaging non-Aboriginal fishermen, fisher people, whatever they're called these days, fishers.
I read a bit about that.
Do we have a provincial, does your party now have a provincial position on fisheries?
Fisheries? No, but in terms of the fisheries part, I'm not too sure about. I will look that up.
Okay.
But we do, in our platform and our policies, we want to serve all the people in the province. Okay, not just specific ethnic groups or specific groups within our society, but we want to serve all. Yeah.
This raises two questions. Staying with the water for a minute, we are a marine society. We're perched on the water. Your district is pretty much underwater. Does your party have any stance or any thoughts about closing the Kitsilano Coast Guard base?
Mr. Cummins was very against that.
Yes.
He was one of the first people that wrote to Mr. Harper saying that it should have stayed open.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you saw that as recently as this past week, we had an episode on a tanker, not a tanker, excuse me, an ocean, a cargo ship sitting in the bay. Guy had a heart attack. 40 minutes. As someone who's lived through a couple of heart attacks, I can tell you, 40 minutes won't cut it. Yeah.
It needs to be more like 5 minutes, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It would help if somebody's available.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to the ethnicity issue. We recently had this interesting episode of some Caucasian people raising hell at Richmond City Hall saying, okay, we don't mind lots of signs in Chinese and other languages, but could they also have some English in them? And Brody and company just threw them out. Which I found curious.
I was at that meeting, actually.
Tell me about it.
You know what? I partly agree with what City Council decided on.
Why? I don't get it.
Because, you know what? The petition that they were going for, I agree that, you know what? It's hard that you can't read Chinese. I can't read Chinese that well either, and I'm going and they're speaking Chinese to me, and I have a hard time with that. So it would be nice to have English on the signs and on the menus and when they serve you. But for issues like that, it's hard to legislate because we don't want a language police. And then one of the fears that I have, if we do have legislation, it might divide the community even more. I think what would be best is more education, telling people, the businesses to show that they can gain more business if they have more English signs, and just bridging the community. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do within my own campaign is to build a stronger community. I think because of the rapid change in Richmond, there's been a lot of disconnect between neighbors.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Is there a divisiveness that's palpable, that you can
know what?
feel?
Because I do see it. A lot of people don't know their neighbors,
Yes.
and we're trying to change that. We're throwing a lot of community barbecues to try to get each other out. But I think it's normal what we're going through because of the rapid pace of change that Richmond has gone through with the immigrants that's coming in, the difference between the Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese coming in the 90s and the mainland Chinese coming in the 2000s.
It's very different.
It's very different. And then plus the original Richmond residents, it's a big change for the past 20 years.
But here's the problem. I mean, this is a country of immigration.
Yeah.
It's a country of immigrants.
Yeah.
And every city in this country has not exactly ghettos, but always has neighborhoods.
Yep.
There's the Italian neighborhood, there's the Greek neighborhood, there's the Jewish neighborhood, and so on. It just seems, I think, for a lot of us that these days, Richmond is just overwhelmingly Little China.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if someone like me walks into Johann Center, wanders in accidentally to Johann Center or Aberdeen Center, I mean, people look at me like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, yeah. I think given time, things like that will change.
I
The
hope so,
language,
yes.
For example, for our second generation, third generation Chinese Canadians,
Yes.
we speak English and we all have a hard time with Chinese. So things like that will change.
But you lived in China. You worked in China for a
I
few
worked in
years.
China. Oh,
Did you pick
yeah, I
up
worked
some
in
Mandarin?
China. I picked them before I
little
went.
bit.
Actually, I didn't know any Mandarin before I went.
Yes.
I actually had to pick it up while I was there. Yeah.
Okay, let's leave that for a minute. We just have a couple of minutes before we take a break.
Yeah.
Top priorities for you. What are the number one priorities for you?
To cut debt and to have a future for younger people. In
Okay.
Richmond.
Okay. Future for younger people. I think each of the parties these days has been talking about apprenticeships and skill training.
Yeah.
Can we do it? Can we afford it? Do we have business behind it?
You know what? I think to solve that problem, I think we need to get our management of our budgets and our fiscal responsibility correct. I think if we can do that, the economy will run better and we can get higher paying jobs. And then we can afford to find, all the younger people can find jobs to stay here.
Look, when we drive past the South Terminal in Richmond, we pass this phenomenon of the BCIT airplane campus. You know, now that's exciting. Every time I go by, I go, wow, isn't that great? Isn't that amazing? But the question is, how many people are going to find work? And that's my question.
I went to that school.
Yes.
I went to that school in the early 2000s.
Yes.
And
look at how fast you're leaving the business.
well, I was lucky because I was able to find a job once I graduated. But I know a lot of
And
people
did you
that graduated.
quickly?
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah.
But I know that a lot of people in my class did not. Yeah.
So you keep coming back to lowering debt. How do we do it?
Well, one of the things that we propose is we have, in the legislature, we have budget estimates, and we only have a few votes on it, like around 50 votes, where we used to have over 250.
Right.
We propose that we increase those votes again, so that we have more scrutiny into what is being spent. For example, I think the healthcare bill is lumped all into one bill, which is a massive bill. Yeah. Other things we're proposing is we have to review what we've been spending. So for the fall legislature, we propose that things should be reviewed. We would bring the CEOs of corporations, of hospitals, things like that, people that are spending taxpayer money, to come and see where they're at and review how they've been spending the money.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
We'll take a little break. We'll come back. Our guest is Nathaniel Lim. He's running for the BC Conservative Party in the May election in Richmond East. This gives you a moment to send us a note on davidberner.com. It gives us a moment to say hello to the good people who help bring this program to you here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Back in just a minute. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. KCM Wealth Management. Continuing our conversation today with Nathaniel Lim, who is the BC Conservative candidate for Richmond East in the upcoming May election. And Nathaniel, let's have a look at this carbon tax. Your party has proposed utterly repealing it, taking 4 years to do that.
Yep.
And we have a report just last month in which our Auditor General, John Doyle, called the entire program smoke and mirrors.
Yep.
It's really a benefit, many of us believe, including the Auditor General. It's a benefit for a handful of big companies.
Yes.
So how would you repeal it? How would you
So
get rid of it?
we want to get rid of the carbon tax
Yes.
because we don't think it's a fair tax.
Okay.
It for businesses that when the carbon tax came in, it was supposed to be the plan was that other jurisdictions would have this tax, right? The plan was that other provinces would have it, but it never caught on. So now the businesses here in BC have to pay for it, while other companies in other provinces don't. So that creates an unfair advantage for other provinces. As well, up north, they don't have transit like we do down here in the lower mainland. So they have to drive their cars. They can't go without it. It also penalizes like transport companies that have to pay this tax when they can't, there's no alternative.
I have to tell you that over the last couple of years, I've had a couple of guests on this program explain carbon trading and the carbon tax to me.
Yeah.
And I think of myself as reasonably bright.
Yeah.
I still don't understand it. I don't get it. And because I don't get it, I tend to believe it's nonsense.
Yeah, yeah. I think part of it is it's supposed to deter people from carbon emissions. But if you can't get away from it, what do you do?
Tell it to all the people in traffic every day. Yeah. One of the things that I know you're interested in is looking at the decline of funding for justice programs.
Yeah, yeah.
What does that mean?
I'm part of the Youth and Family Court Advisory in Richmond.
Yes.
And one of the things that we found that Richmond, I think, had 5 judges before. I think they're down to 1 or 2. And one that's part-time, actually.
That's peculiar.
So they've cut a lot of judges. We find that a lot of when we go to the court and court watch, we find that actually a lot of things get pushed off because there's no time for it. And then I also hear stories of cases being dropped because they haven't been gone through the court process in time.
Justice delayed is justice denied.
Yes.
Justice has to be timely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the BC Conservative have committed to putting more money into the justice system.
Are you confident we have the money to do that?
Well, we've costed it out.
Yeah.
And we find that there is some money for that, and it is a priority for us.
What else do we have to do? I know that you're interested in not only law enforcement, but really law reform. You're sort of a big law and order guy.
Not law and order, I just want justice in our society.
So what is it that we have to do? You've got a pretty large RCMP detachment in Richmond, and they're very active.
Yeah, and they do a great job.
Yeah, mostly they do a great
mostly.
job. Occasionally they act a little goofy, but that's true of all of us.
Yeah.
What is it that we have to do? What is it that we have to do better in terms of law reform?
I think if you can't, the law enforcement is doing their job, but if you can't pass it through the courts, it has no enforcement behind it. I work with a lot of youth that come and go with the justice system. And I think that has to change.
Last week I asked a Liberal candidate, Daryl Plekas, a criminologist running in his home area of Abbotsford South, legalize marijuana, yes or no? So I'll ask you.
For me, I mean, legalize marijuana, I know a lot of people I work with and people I know that that smoke marijuana. And it really depends on why people take it. Like, I mean,
they usually take it to get high.
They take it to get high. So
that's what I've noticed over the years.
So what I'm talking about is recreational use. If it's not doing anybody harm, that's okay. But a lot of people's fears are people that are taking it for not just for recreational.
Okay, here's the report. You just said if they just take it for recreational, it's okay. But the last report I had, which was less than a week ago, is that pot smoking is absolutely endemic in the workplace, especially in construction. And now maybe the construction union wants to come and have a fight with me, but there was a report about a week or so ago of some windows that were supposed to be installed at the top of a tower downtown. Fell, right? And the clear indicator was that the gang was having a little toke. So
it does have its dangers. Right?
yes.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, legalize marijuana, yes or no?
Legalize marijuana, yes or no? But that's not really in our policy at the moment.
Oh.
The BC Conservative is not looking into that at the moment.
Well, I'd recommend you take it back to the office.
Yeah, I
because
will.
Because I think people are really, I think that's important to a lot of people. And almost everybody has an opinion about it. It is a kind of beacon, a topic, you know. What else would you do in terms of law reform? What else do we need?
For law reform?
Yeah.
You know, for me, the reason I'm running is more, I want to build stronger communities. For example, in my neighborhood, a lot of people don't know each other, and if there's something happening, nobody knows they don't know if they're neighbors or if it's people just kind of walking around. So I think the way we can make our neighborhoods safer is not just through law enforcement. It's through building stronger communities.
How? What does that mean? Doing
just
what?
Knowing each other, people being connected with each other, people interacting with each other. I think that's a big thing that needs to happen in Richmond.
Okay. Do you have any particular views on immigration policies?
Immigration. No, I'm an immigrant myself. My family's an immigration, and we love Canada for allowing us to come.
And you think, I appreciate that the immigration is in fact a federal issue, but you think we're doing a reasonably good job?
Immigration? I think today I heard that they just opened it up again to the skilled workers. Certain occupations like physiotherapy, they've opened that up again.
Well, we have a major issue, for example, going on with temporary immigration, work permits, temporary work permits. We have the entire BC Federation of Labor fighting with the Royal Bank of Canada. And in fact, getting a sit-down with the head of the Royal Bank actually flew out here for a sit-down with Jim Sinclair of the BC Fed. And Labor is pretty upset that RBC has been outsourcing things.
You know, a lot of people are looking for jobs here. Those jobs should go to people here first. All right. The trouble is, a lot of people, there's some jobs here that people don't want, and that's when immigration's coming in, right? I also see it like a lot of immigrants that come are not using the skills that they've come for.
Oh, really? Like what, for example?
For example, my parents came. They're business owners, but it was difficult for them to get into to business because of language issues. I think there's a lot of that. I see a lot of family, like people in my community, that are having a hard time integrating.
Really?
Yeah. And I think that's because of the language issue, right? And certification as well, right? And
well, let's talk about Richmond specifically. If you were running the business council, what would you jump all over? What do you think Richmond needs to do?
What Richmond needs to do? We have a lot of industrial parks that could use more support in that.
Really?
I mean, there's lots of businesses there. Like we could grow businesses there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Richmond always looks to me like it's expanding. It looks like we're always
it is.
taking things out of the agricultural reserve, and we're building condos.
Well,
and so
I've
on.
worked with a lot of the farms there actually, with the sharing farm and things like that. I think we could promote more farming, agricultural economy. Right? We have lots of cranberries. We grow a lot of cranberries, but I think that could be expanded.
It's really kind of shameful and interesting how fishing, which was once the heart of Steveston, Richmond, is now largely a tourist activity. It's a tourist attraction.
There's not that many fishes coming around this year, actually.
Yeah.
So it's changed. The neighborhood's changed in Steveston.
Do you see an opportunity for a particular business that you would love to see in Richmond?
I would love it to go away from just service industries. There's a lot of service jobs, I think. And I think
service jobs like restaurants and hotels and so on. Yes,
it would be good, I think, if we can expand from that. like go away from that because those jobs are not that high paying.
Does Richmond, do you know if Mr. Brody and his pals, they're pretty aggressive. They have an aggressive general manager.
Yeah.
Do they go overseas and shop for business?
Not that I know of, actually. Yeah.
Do you approve of what previous premiers have done in that regard? The premiers quite often go to China, go to all kinds of places looking for
It's
for
debated
business.
whether that has had any effect, right?
Really?
Yeah. Well, I remember from what I remember, Christy Clark went over to China saying that she was able to secure a certain amount of jobs.
Yes.
But it turns out it was the HD mining issue where they're bringing jobs, like workers from out of town here instead of actually hiring people here, jobs created for here. Yeah.
We've got Nathaniel Lim. We've got 1 minute left. You're a candidate for Richmond East. Why should people vote for you?
I think I'm connected to community. I might be younger, but the direct work that I do, I like talking to people. I know what's going on within Richmond, the struggles that people are going to. And I want to bridge that from what everyday people are dealing with, the hardships they're dealing with, to Victoria.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, good luck, Nathaniel Lim. Okay, folks, we are continuing our political investigation for the election. 2 weeks from now, David Eby, well-known human rights lawyer and so on, BC Civil Liberties, is running in the same neighborhood as Christy Clark in Point Grey. But we take a little break from all of this, and next week we meet a very interesting fellow who's written a book called A Complicated Love. What happens when your son comes out to you and that forces you to come out as well? Ooh la la. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again soon here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Good night.